Everyone needs alone time sometimes. A little peace and quiet can be good for your mind. But when being alone isn't your choice, when you're forced into isolation, it becomes something very different. In that situation, the effects can be deep and serious. And the longer someone is alone, the worse those effects can get. Imagine being locked in one place for days, weeks, even years, with no people around and nothing meaningful to do. Your body and mind will start to change. At first, your stress levels rise. Over time, that stress becomes constant. Human connection and purpose are key to emotional balance. Experts call it social reality testing, a way to understand if your thoughts and feelings make sense. But without people or things to do, that mental balance begins to fade. Thoughts start to spin out of control. You feel lost and your emotions take over. This can lead to depression, obsessive thinking, suicidal thoughts, and in some cases, even hallucinations or delusions. If isolation continues, the brain's stress center, the limbic system, becomes overactive. Meanwhile, the thinking center, the prefrontal cortex, starts to shrink. You lose focus, memory gets worse, and decision-making becomes harder. Logic gives way to emotion. This imbalance affects the whole body. You may lose track of time, sleep poorly, feel dizzy, have headaches, and become extra sensitive. Stress can even harm your digestion, causing weight loss and low appetite. Some people try to stay strong with daily routines like reading, writing, or exercise. But in extreme isolation, it's rarely enough. The United Nations and many human rights groups call this kind of long-term isolation a form of psychological torture. This practice, often called solitary confinement, is still used in many prison systems, especially in the United States. In 2019, over 120,000 inmates were locked up alone for 22 to 24 hours a day in tiny cells, usually just 6 by 9 feet with no windows. Solitary confinement began in the late 1700s, when Quaker groups in America believed silence and reflection could help reform people. That's where the word penitentiary comes from. But over time, people realized it was extremely harmful. Famous writer Charles Dickens once called it worse than any physical torture. Though its use dropped for a while, it came back strongly in the 1980s when the US prison population exploded. With overcrowding, protests, and violence inside prisons, authorities turned to solitary confinement to control inmates. Even people who broke small rules, like talking back to a guard, were sometimes put in isolation. Solitary confinement is dangerous for anyone, but for people with mental health issues, it's even worse. And the damage doesn't end when they leave the cell. People who've been through solitary often suffer from anxiety, paranoia, personality changes, and PTSD. They feel disconnected from others. They can't focus. They struggle to return to normal life. Some states now limit solitary confinement for children, pregnant women, and people with serious mental illness. Some have set time limits, like no more than 15 or 20 days. But these rules aren't always followed, and some prisons still find ways around them. The truth is, solitary confinement doesn't make prisons safer. It doesn't help people grow or change. In fact, it often does the opposite. Other countries have found better ways. Norway, for example, keeps fewer people in prison, invests more in rehabilitation, education, and job training. And it works. Norway has one of the lowest reoffending rates in the world. That proves something important. People heal better and become better when they're not left to suffer alone.